Armchair Explorer is a part of the Voyescape podcast network. Check out all of their shows from around the world at voyescape.com. This episode is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. You know, we've all got that one friend, haven't we? That one who finds all the best travel deals, picks the right cards, and somehow ends up in first class for the price of coach. Well, now you can be that friend because Smart Travel is like him or her, but in podcast form. They cover all things travel finance, like how to get real value from points, not just a tiny little reward at the end of checkout, or which flight deals are actually deals and not just clickbait, or when that convenient travel bundle might actually be a hidden tax in disguise, all that stuff. So travel smarter and spend less with help from NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts.
There's nothing quite like the first time you see them. It almost felt out of body. It almost felt alien in nature because you're taking something like the sky that has been stable your whole life, and then all of a sudden it's moving rapidly, or it's banding, or it's got colors that you've never seen. So it's just so foreign feeling. But I think that the knowing that when we were pushing the shutter, that we were capturing what we were capturing, that's what was exciting. And so to know that from my experience, when it is really bright and it is really exceptional, it's so bright that your skin almost turns green. The ocean turns green. And so I felt like that was the exciting part, was knowing that we were capturing it, because by capturing it, we could actually share it with other people. It gives me chills still thinking about that final scene when all the excitement is there and we're screaming and hollering and hooting. It almost like, I don't know, in some ways just has this deep resonation that this is what like childhood exploration is always meant to be about.
Hey guys, welcome to Armchair Explorer. My name's Aaron Miller. I'm a travel writer and your host. And today we're going to go to one of my favorite countries in the world, the land of fire and ice. That is what they call Iceland, and it's an apt description. Iceland has, in my opinion, more wonders per square mile than anywhere else on the planet. It's amazing. It's one of the most raw and dramatic places you'll ever visit. And taking us there today is adventurer, filmmaker, and photographer Chris Burkard. And oh my God, does Chris shoot some beautiful images. He specializes in adventure photography, does a lot of ocean and surf stuff, and it is some of the most spectacular outdoor photography I've ever seen. Literally, check it out. His Instagram, if you don't believe me, is at Chris Burkard. Chris has shot all over the world, but Iceland is special for him. He's shot there dozens of times, and something about it just keeps drawing him back for more. So this is a story about two films he's made there. One is called Under an Arctic Sky, and the other is called The Forgotten Coast, which is his latest project. And although the trips that he made the films about are a few years apart, both are about discovering remote, wild places where few, if any, people have ever tread before, and connecting with them in the most adventurous way possible. But before we get into that, very quickly, thank you so much to everyone that's left a review of the show recently. That really means a heck of a lot to me. It makes a big difference for people discovering the show. So if you have a minute and fancy clicking on those glowing 5-star reviews right now, that would be a huge help. You don't have to write anything. You literally just have to go to your podcast player app right now. And that really does make a huge difference. So thank you so much for anything you can do. You can also reach out to me directly at Armchair Explorer Podcast is the Instagram. Follow me there, connect with me there, or leave a comment on Spotify. Let me know what you think of an episode or what you want to hear more of. I will get back to you. It would be great to connect. But don't worry about that just yet, because we're about to go to one of the most rugged and awe-inspiring countries in the world. And taking us there is someone who knows it better than most and whose dream was to surf beneath its Arctic skies and ride its forgotten coast.
I never grew up with the capacity of traveling or having that be a part of my life. So when I did start to see the world, it was a lot all at once. It was a lot of emotion. It was a lot of kind of eye-opening experience. It was education. It was everything built into one. And when I first started spending time in not just Iceland, but like Scandinavian countries, I really fell in love with the way that they sort of appreciated their family time. They have this like deep reverence for the time that they take off from work and who they spend it with and what they do. And I guess that was just a different mentality, people that didn't seem as caught up with like the hustle of the culture that I was, grew up with. And so it was shocking, but I eventually sort of realized that this is something that I might want to consider in my life. And it took many years, but I eventually started to question like, well, why do I need to come home? Why do I need to come back to California? What's holding me to this place?
There are many themes running through Chris's work, but at its core is an exploration of our relationship with the natural world. He does shoot pure landscapes, but more often than not, we are in the scene, standing on summits, paddling still water, jumping into pure turquoise lakes, the ground dusted in light spring snow. As his career grew and he continued to travel, his tie with his home in California did loosen, but the bond never broke. Because where he grew up, where it all began, and where he still spends most of his time is in the ocean.
It's a hard thing to actually articulate because, why and how I connect with surfing is a lot deeper than just like sitting on a board in the ocean or catching a wave. Like for me, the ocean in general, as a whole, it was like my first canvas as an artist, first of all. And it was a place that I found a lot of solace as a kid. And it was a babysitter at times where I'd get dropped off at the beach with a couple dollars for lunch and get picked up later, and I felt so much kinship and closeness with the beach towns that I grew up in. And it was fascinating for me as I started to travel and see the world that I'd be going to these remote areas and villages where you'd, be somewhere in the Faroe Islands, pulling out a surfboard, jumping in the water, shooting photos, and the whole village would come out and people would stare and watch. And it wasn't the kind of thing where they're like excited. They're nervous. They're scared because so many cultures around the world, their relationship with the ocean is nothing like that. Coming from California, it's such a privilege to be able to see the ocean as this way to experience joy.
In California, where the beaches are golden, or Hawaii, where the sea is warm, that joy is easy to find. But head further north, where the ocean darkens and walls of water rise from angry seas, it's a different story. But that inspired Chris, because in that foreboding water, there were waves that had never been ridden. The only thing was, in order to find them, he needed to get cold.
Cold water surfing is really anywhere where I guess you are required to wear a wetsuit, right? But I think that more specifically, the places that have fascinated me are more remote areas of the world where surf culture isn't as much, or at the time wasn't as much of a thing. And so that brought me to places like Kamchatka, Russia, Vladivostok, Russia, the Faroe Islands, the Kuril Islands, the Aleutian Islands multiple times, Iceland, Alaska, Norway. So these kind of more off the beaten path, you're researching, you're finding a potential new wave that has never been ridden. It's akin to climbing a mountain peak or finding a summit that nobody's ever summited, right? And I think now, obviously, it's a little bit harder to find those types of places, but they do exist. They're out there. There's so many. And I feel privileged to be able to kind of have documented a bit of those and a few of those, made films or shared stories about them. And I think that the goal for me has always been like combining the exploration element to it, which is where you're trying to find something new. And I think cold water surfing is often overlooked as like a fringe thing, but there are so many dedicated people out there doing it daily, which I think is the coolest part.
And it was that spirit of exploration, of helping to bring that joy of the ocean to new communities, that would eventually take him to Iceland. Iceland has become Chris's muse, and it's easy to see why. It is an elemental place, a place where the earth appears as if it is still forming. The ground vents steam and erupts scalding water. Lava flows stark red on black mountain sides. It is a place of fire and ice, where nature is at its most vast and wild and humbling. He shot there dozens of times, and every time he went back, he went deeper, until finally he found somewhere where maybe, just maybe, under an Arctic sky, there was a wave which no one else had ridden before.
Under an Arctic Sky was kind of a beautiful mistake, I guess you could say, because it was never intended to be a film or anything, to be honest. It was actually an assignment from the magazine that we had pitched to go and surf this remote wave in Iceland that required boat access.
The wave was located in the West Fjords, a remote mountainous peninsula of sheer sea cliffs and labyrinths of hidden coves and inlets. Traveling with him were pro surfers Timmy Reyes, Justin Quintal, Sam Hammer, and a few other friends. Chris had scouted a promising-looking section in one of the most isolated parts of the fjords. They drove 6 hours from Reykjavik, boarded a boat, and took off, hugging the coast, checking charts and scanning the shore for swells, until they found it, the perfect cold water wave. They threw on their suits, jumped in, hollering and hooting and paddling towards it. But just as they did, dark clouds started gathering on the horizon.
In the moment, at that time, it was brutal, right? Because of the fact that we are basically out there. We've gone so far. We've done so much effort to try and get to this place, as you can imagine, right? And then to all of a sudden have the captain, be like, as the moment we hit the water and paddling out to the shore, he's like, we need to turn around. That was a shocker.
In the film, the captain says, the ocean controls everything around us. And he was right. He signaled them to come in, he turned the boat around and made for port as fast as they could go. Literally minutes after they arrived, the tempest hit, a full-blown hurricane with gusts of winds 160 miles an hour strong and a blizzard of swirling snow all around. It would turn out to be the worst storm to hit Iceland in 25 years.
And so when that all happened, we were like, trip's over. This is it. Like, we're done. Like, we had to cut our losses and go home. Like, there's no chance that this is going to work out to be anything more than just like a, total loss.
They faced a dilemma. If they stayed in town, they would be trapped and they had no idea how long for. So they decided to race the storm instead, throwing all their gear in the back of the van and taking off into the night, trying to get back to Reykjavik before the storm blocked them in. And as they drove, the blizzard turned to a whiteout. They could barely make out the road in front of them or the cliff edge to their side. And soon there was no road at all. Multiple times they were forced to dig themselves out by hand until finally, after 18 treacherous hours of driving, a cabin appeared by the side of the road and they ran inside. They would end up sheltering there for 3 days, just waiting for that storm to break.
We kind of realized that like we were willing to stick it out together. And like, it was sort of like one of us was like, I'll stay. And the other one was like, I'll stay. And we kind of, put our hands together and we're like, let's do this. Let's just try to make it work. Regardless of what happens, we're here for more than just, work. We're here for an experience. And I truly feel like there was this bonding friendship ethos kind of that took place that was really beautiful. And that resulted in us, pushing further and eventually finding ourselves surfing under the Northern Lights, which was something that I never planned on. I never went to Iceland with the intention of doing that. It literally just happened.
It's an incredible moment, and perhaps of all Chris's surfing photos, the most emblematic of that spirit of exploration and joy he was seeking to capture and share. That vast wonder of nature and our relationship with it when we truly connect, not just looking at it from afar, but riding it, surfing the Northern Lights.
There's nothing quite like the first time you see them. It almost felt out of body. It almost felt alien in nature because you're taking something like the sky that has been stable your whole life, and then all of a sudden it's moving rapidly, or it's banding, or it's got colors that you've never seen. So it's just so foreign feeling. But I think that the knowing that when we were pushing the shutter, that we were capturing what we were capturing, that's what was exciting. And so to know that from my experience, when it is really bright and it is really exceptional, it's so bright that your skin almost turns green. The ocean turns green. And so I felt like that was the exciting part, was knowing that we were capturing it, because by capturing it, we could actually share it with other people. It gives me chills still thinking about that final scene when all the excitement is there and we're screaming and hollering and hooting. It almost like, I don't know, in some ways just has this deep resonation that this is what like childhood exploration is always meant to be about. If there's a better recipe for inspiration, I don't know what that is, but that for me is pretty much as good as it gets.
After that trip, Chris returned to Iceland to his muse many times, exploring it by land, by sea, by surfboard, and by air. And it was by air, flying 4,000 feet above the ground many years later, that he discovered Iceland's glacial river systems for the first time.
During the winter months, these glaciers, they're always moving and receding or ebbing and flowing, and they're just grinding up rocks and soil and rhyolite and all kinds of stuff. Basically what happens is when those ice caves, which is kind of where the glaciers exit, usually where the river originates, there's an ice cave of some sorts, or there's like a glacial lagoon or whatever. Those minerals, they spew out, right? If you will, almost like someone turned on the faucet. And so what happens is they are of a different density of the water, right? And so sometimes that material can be sitting on the surface, sometimes on the bottom. It depends, but it is mineral rich and it is really beautiful and vibrant, and more vibrant during certain times of year. If there's organic materials that have kind of come in, it can change the color patterns or the vibrancy. And they flow all the way out to the ocean. And usually when the rivers get really shallow, they come to this big braided kind of open plain, almost like a flood delta or something like that. They tend to be very veinous, right? And they kind of weave through these shallow little patterns and they just look absolutely gorgeous. But the funny thing is that from the ground, you would never know. You would never see that beauty. And I have often related it to the fact that like if people could see how pretty they were and how much of a magnificent spectacle of nature that was, they would, hold it in as high regard as the Mona Lisa or something like that.
From the air, they do look like a work of art, but more like a Jackson Pollock than a Mona Lisa. It's as if the glaciers were pots of brightly coloured paints that have spilt and twisted into luminous strands of blue and red and orange and green, and in doing so, form the most perfect abstract painting. Chris spent 7 years documenting these braided rivers, but the more he looked down upon them, the more he yearned to experience them up close for himself. Just a quick shout out, guys, for Chris's latest film. It's called The Forgotten Coast. That's one of the stories that we're telling here today. It's super cool. It's beautiful, as is all his other work. You can find out more about that at chrisburkard.com or follow him on Instagram at chrisburkard. He's an amazing guy to follow. His page is properly beautiful, and there's lots of other cool stuff up on that website too. But don't miss that new film. It's stunning, and you get incredible shots of those glacial riverbeds, which just for that alone, it's worth it. So check it out, The Forgotten Coast, at chrisburkard.com.
It's a 300-mile stretch of coastline that goes from kind of like the eastern, like the start of East Iceland to sort of the end of South Iceland. It's like basically the south coast, right? And what makes it unique, and I guess why I chose that ominous title, The Forgotten Coast, was because there are no safe harbors. There's no real towns. There's maybe like one in the middle, but there's nowhere to like harbor a boat, right? And so what happened is over the last 1,000 years, when European settlers or Vikings or whoever would come to Iceland, a lot of times they would get stranded there. It's where all the shipwrecks are because it's this big, massive volcanic sand deposit. It's where all the glaciers kind of deposit to the ocean. And so the beach is always changing. There's big undercurrents. In fact, the most dangerous beach in the world, Reynisfjara, is right there. It's part of that stretch. This is a place where a lot of people have died from near shore drownings because boats would try to, come up on shore and they couldn't make it, or people would have to jump out of the boat. And there was such a deep undercurrent right off the shore that it was almost like a washing machine. You couldn't get on shore and you couldn't get back out to sea. So it was really dangerous. And I guess to me, the coastline represented a stretch of history, 300 miles of history, because you are looking at documented shipwrecks. You are seeing whales that have washed up. You are seeing things like unexploded ordnances from World War II that had washed up on the shoreline. There's just no way to get to them unless you're on like a helicopter or a bush plane. And there are these hut systems along the way, and those hut systems are purely for survival. Opening the doors to some of these huts and walking inside, and you're seeing like old nautical maps and emergency instructions and survival guides and like a tub of old jelly and some rubber boots and wool blankets. And I mean, all of that stuff is pretty disgusting. But you start to think about, you think about where you are, you think about how remote it is, you think about how wild it feels to be there. And then you open the door and you wonder, who was the last person to open this door? And what was the context in which they did?
It had never been crossed end to end. People had accessed all of it at one time or another, but no one had ever attempted to traverse the forgotten coast in its entirety. It wouldn't be easy. Chris could ride his bike for most of it, just following the beach and shore, but the route was blocked by nearly 40 rivers. So he decided to draft in experienced bikepacker and rafter Steve Fassbender, aka Doom. They would carry pack rafts on their back as they pedaled, and when they got to a river, they would break down their bike, inflate the raft, put their half-assembled bike on their raft, paddle across the river, reassemble their bike, deflate the raft, pack it up, put it on their back, and start pedaling again. 40 times. But it wasn't just hard. Like those shipwrecks before him, it was dangerous.
I know that in this conversation, I probably sound like this risk taker and somebody who just wants to go out there and, test himself against the environment, but I'm actually really not. I go to great lengths to kind of understand the landscapes that I'm in. And I flew to almost every single one of these emergency shelters in a small Cessna, a Piper Cub. And we landed and I opened the door to make sure they were safe and usable because I knew that there's a chance we would have to rely upon them. You're in a very exposed part of the coast. I mean, the weather can change instantly. And so I didn't want to take a risk and I wanted to know. And oddly enough, I remember flying over one of them and I saw like the lighthouse and I was like, oh, well, it's right there. So it's good. I know it's there. It's standing, everything. And it turns out that on that stretch, on that day, I think it was like day 4, we were in the rain for maybe 8-9 hours and just heinous wind and getting cold. And I think the scary part was that we were kind of getting this crosswind. And so each river crossing was getting progressively a little more scary. And as you mentioned, there's no keel, so there's no fin under the boat. And so it's a flat bottom boat. So what happens, you're paddling and you're totally at the mercy of the wind. Like it's drifting you across the surface like a potato chip floating on water. And so we would have to then go higher upriver in order to get enough speed to get across before we got pushed out to the ocean, which the river mouths are like the death zone. You don't want to be anywhere near there. That's basically like the least safe area you could ever be. And our final crossing, we crossed this river and we were like, oh man, like so glad we made that. And we see the lighthouse in the distance and we're riding our bikes and we get up there and I'm looking around and I'm like, dude, where's the shelter? Like this lighthouse just goes to this cement block. And I'm looking around and I finally look down at my feet and I see like an 1/8 inch of glass. And that was the window, the top of the window. And I was like, this whole thing is buried under 8 feet of sand. And it was that moment that we all like sort of came to grips with reality that we had to ride 10 more miles and cross one more major river, like a big one. And by the time we got there, like we knew the speed was increasing in the wind. We knew that making a shelter at this point, making a camp would be pretty dangerous as well because you have so much wind, your tent can blow away, you're gonna get sand and wet all over it. And even setting up a tent would be treacherous, right? So we really needed a shelter and we were kind of getting hypothermic because we've been wet and then you put a dry suit on, you get sweaty in the dry suit and the temperatures drop. So we got to this river crossing and I remember looking at the water and just seeing like white caps going sideways. And I didn't want to go. Cameron, who was with us, didn't want to go. We were both like, let's make a tent. Let's just make a shelter. Let's camp on the shore. But right across the river, we could see a shelter and I had opened the door and I knew that one was good. And I looked over at Steve Fassbender, who was our third person in this group. And, he had the most river experience. He's the person who kind of had taught me and instructed me. And, he's like, let's go. We got this. Like, I've got you. I'll watch you. Like, this is dangerous, but like, we can do this. And we had talked about scenarios and how we would manage these things and what was going on. And yeah, we crossed the river and I don't think I've ever been more gripped in my whole life. And it was scary. I mean, it was like just kind of, biting your teeth and being like, I just want to make it through this. And every couple paddle strokes, you feel a gust and the whole boat felt like it was going to tip over. And so you're leaning into it. And it was just a wild experience and something that really was humbling And we got across, and I remember getting to that shelter, and never in my life have I been so thankful for 4 walls and a roof.
But despite the hardships, it was staggeringly beautiful too. In the film, there's a moment where you see Chris and Doom pedaling across a black sand beach, mist on distant mountains, surf breaking to their left, the slow, not quite setting sun of the endless Icelandic summer to their right. And the camera turns to Chris, and he is lit up, golden and beaming. "This is amazing," he screams. And it is, because in that moment, he'd gone from above the painting to inside it. He'd not just admired those glacial rivers from afar, he'd become a part of them.
It's profound, right? It's the contrast is what you really go to Iceland for. The black beaches with the white foam of the ocean coming up and crystal looking icebergs sitting on the shoreline. It's that contrast that you're looking for, the vibrant green, the moss, it's all of that. And so it was wild for us to be in pure wilderness out there, super remote. And then all of a sudden we ride our bikes onto a beach where there's like a tourist parking lot and a bunch of people, you know, and it was so jarring emotionally to be like, wow, like there are humans here. And, you know, we ride off into the distance and we're like, okay, like c'est la vie, like, but, you know, just you're leaving existence. And that happened maybe 2 to 3 times. Once in Jökulsárlón, and then the other time was the town of Vik, because Vik is one of the only coastal towns. There's no harbor, but it's a coastal town. It's a major kind of tourist resupply area, and it's a beautiful beach. But I remember rolling into the grocery store there. You know, we've got like seaweed attached to us, and we're just so gross and gnarly and haven't showered in days. And we rolled into the grocery store and we're just eating copious amounts of calories, everything we can get our hands on, and that was a hilarious experience. And I really feel fondly about that memory because it just kind of, it's the ultimate, you know, kind of contrast, I guess, of being in this remote place and realizing that at times when you're having some of your most wild adventures or your most life-changing experience, you can often be just a couple of miles from like somebody on the Highway 1 having the time of their life, you know, and or tourists kind of maybe just loading up on food and carrying on. And both experiences are good. Both are needed. And I love that. I love the contrast there.
After 7 days, Chris and Doom reached the end of the journey, wet, covered in sea salt, wind-whipped, but happy. To navigate these rivers is to know them, Chris says, looking into the camera, beaming again. And to know them is to love them.
I had flown over it for many years. You're often 1,000 to 4,000 feet above it, but to like dip my hand in it and paddle through it and see like the colors swirl around was something that I had always dreamt of. And I guess if you really deeply want to advocate for a place, you should really know what it feels like on the ground level. You know, if you're going to be a voice of reason or a voice of, you know, for a voiceless place, then you should, you know, be fully immersed in it in the best way you can. And so that was kind of my objective from the beginning. What does it mean to kind of be moved by something? What does it mean to be moved by something to the point where you actually want to change the way you operate? That you want to change the way you live, that you want to change where you live. It's about, you know, allowing us as people to kind of be immersed in beauty and to try to give ourselves the privilege of asking bigger questions in those places. Because I feel like that's what nature provides. It provides a safe, therapeutic, often place for us to ask some of life's biggest questions.
Chris talks about the synthesization of nature, how 2 things, when combined, can sometimes make a new thing. The brush strokes of an abstract painting, the shifting sands of a glacial riverbed. Chris's work blurs those lines, and in between them, right in the middle, he puts us. Because that's how we should see it. To get a true perspective of nature, we should look at it from the inside, and especially, we should look for it in those places we have not yet been, those forgotten coasts and Arctic skies. For that is where nature is at its most vast and daunting, and we are at our most wild and free. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for taking us on this adventure. It's one of my favorite places in the world. If you haven't been to Iceland, just go. put it on the list and hit me up at armchair-explorer podcast on Instagram if you want some tips. Chris's latest film is called The Forgotten Coast. You can find out more about that and his other work at chrisburkard.com. You can check out the full film up there, but there's lots of other cool stuff too, books and prints, including some of the shots of those glacial rivers, which I was describing, and you have to see them. Check out at Chris Burkard on Instagram too. He has an amazing page. So until next time, thanks for listening. Thanks for leaving that review if you can. It makes a big difference. And most importantly, keep searching for those unridden waves, whether they're out in the world or just something new to you. Because the more we look for wonder in the world, the more the wonder of the world becomes a part of who we are. Dare to be truly alive. Armchair Explorer is produced by Armchair Productions, the audio experts for the travel industry. My name's Aaron Miller. I write and present the show. Charles Tyree does the audio editing and sound design. Our theme music is by the artist Sweet Chat. I'll see you next time.
I'm Max Hartshorn, host of the Go Nomad Travel Podcast. Every week, I bring you a short 5 to 8 minute escape to somewhere unexpected. I cover the kinds of travel stories you don't hear anywhere else, quirky destinations, unusual adventures, and people who make the world endlessly interesting. If you love discovering new places but don't have time for a long show, these bite-sized episodes are perfect for your commute, your walk, or your coffee break. Join me on the Go Nomad Travel Podcast and explore the world in just a couple of minutes.
If you want to travel more, ideally in luxury, but without the luxury price tag, this show is for you. I'm DeAndre Koch, and on Revolutionizing Your Journey, I use my unique vantage point as a financial advisor to break down exactly how my wife and I leverage credit card points and miles to fly business class, stay at 5-star resorts, and take bucket list trips for a fraction of the cost. Each week, I share real strategies packed with actionable tips and interview some of the smartest travelers in the game to help you revolutionize the way you travel. Travel well, live boldly, and find Revolutionizing Your Journey wherever you get your podcasts.